Welcome to the Plant Allied Recovery Podcast, a podcast for people interested in healing disease within them to transform their lives, find their purpose, and heal themselves through working with sacred plant medicines. On this podcast, we discuss plant allied recovery, elevating consciousness, holistic health and wellness, growth, spirituality, mental health, and psychedelic integration. We are your hosts, Keelia Ryan and EJ Oldak. We are the co-founders of Plant Allied Recovery, and we are grateful to be of service. So today we have a very special guest, Zach Barney, a dear friend of mine, fellow sacred space holder, and expert on lifestyle medicine, who's going to be joining us in this loving discussion today. Hi, Zach. So to get started, I wanted to talk about what is lifestyle medicine.
Yeah, for me, so lifestyle medicine is a whole method and system to be able to tap in to our own inner healer. And it's a really simple process that we can also use to integrate these different journeys with plant medicines and also integrate experiences in our life. So it's really powerful practice, very holistic, and combines a lot of what I've learned from my journeys in Brazil, Peru, Colombia, and South America in general.
Wow, okay. And so what does that look like for you in your life?
So the first thing that I would say is key to it is the breath. And the reason the breath is so important is I see it as like this vehicle, this channel for everything else that we want in our life. It's a really essential foundation to everything, like whether that's something we want to do moving wise, or if we want to create something, we want to express something. It's really important to be grounded and connected with our breath, and especially when we're interacting in a world with lots of movement, chaos, things are changing and shifting. So being grounded with the breath is really an essential piece to finding that medicine within ourselves.
It's so true. And that's been my experience and a big imbalance for me in my life. And I mean, it just goes so deep. Like, if I am in the present moment and creating from the breath, it flows naturally and I'm guided towards right action and my nervous system is at ease. And for me, a lot of the dis-ease in my life that has led to my addictions and sufferings comes from like almost fighting that, like being tight and working hard against the present moment and clenching as I try and do as much as fast as I can and creating stories around time scarcity. And I could go on and on and on. As you said, the breath really is everything and a foundation of movement and creation and just peace in this world.
Oh,
Definitely. And I wanted to know how did you come into this as like what is your background in finding lifestyle medicine and teaching others about lifestyle medicine? How did that come to be?
so it really starts with a story of dis-ease, and I was born with asthma. So literally, when I grew up and growing up, the doctors would tell me like, you have asthma, you have this disease, this chronic illness that is uncurable, you just have it. And and I believed that growing up, and my parents believed it. They told me, and everyone told me that like I have disease. So growing up, I believed that story all the time, like, oh, I can't do this thing, like I can't breathe, I can't run a mile, I can't, do intense physical activity. All these can'ts, they all were in my story. It was programmed into me that all these things that you can't do because you can't breathe well. And I'd say that was really the start of my own journey, was not being able to fully breathe. And also in that, I realized how important it is to breathe because of how hard it was to breathe when I was growing up. And no one told me that, yeah, you could do these practices, like, work on your nutrition or work on your mindset. uh, Plant medicine wasn't really a thing at all. Spiritual practices weren't a thing growing up. And really, it wasn't until I was 21 and I made a decision to go to Brazil for the first time. Is when that was my first introduction to these practices. And I still remember that day when I arrived in Brazil and I was on the bus, and I just remember seeing the mountains, looking out the window of the bus, and started to cry out of nowhere. Started crying, and looking back, I know that that was my soul awakening. That first awakening, that first
Mm.
spontaneous emotional release that came out of nowhere. And I could feel that my ancestors and spirit was just like clapping me on and cheering me on and saying, "Yay! Like you're doing it! Like you made that first step towards your healing." And so that was the first step in what towards this thing called lifestyle medicine. Though before, I would say like my whole life was very much the opposite, complete opposite, and believing the story, believing the system, doing the things that everyone told me to do. My parents, teachers, society, shooting it on myself all the time, having these high expectations, all of the above. And I felt completely disconnected from myself, from my emotions. And it wasn't until I actually took that first step and started to go on this journey to find myself where everything started to really start to make sense. And so it was really important to have that space and go on the journey and take an adventure on and go on this new path. So yeah, that's a big part of like the beginning of my story.
Mm. Yeah, I relate so much just to the idea of overcoming the boxes and the societal like structures that we think that we're trapped in, and just knowing that we can always overcome them. For me, it was like my health journey with, my back being fused together and being told all of these things, but then recognizing that we can grow through it is so important. And taking that step towards just blind faith and believing in yourself, and that maybe, you have it within you to heal yourself. And yeah, it's super powerful.
Agreed. I've also had similar challenges with health issues arising as due to dis-ease within me. And a lot of that was generational, I think, generational trauma, and the result of me acting out those traumas and creating more traumas in my body, and ultimately developed into, one, an addiction that I overcame, but more long term it was just like emotional eating and an awful relationship with food, which turned into IBS. And then you go to the doctor and they're just like, "Oh, you have IBS and you're anxious and you can take anti-anxiety medication." I'm like, "That's fucking bullshit." And that was years ago, and years on my self-healing journey that I'm still deep on. It will never end, but I'm just getting to like stuck emotions in my stomach and undigested emotions in my stomach. And so all that to say, just kudos to us, I think, for not accepting that story that we're broken and, oh, you're going to be this way forever, because
Mhm.
it's not true.
Hmm. Definitely. It starts with the stories. Everything starts with stories, and with our parents' stories, our grandparents' stories as well. And what I also see is the emotions. The emotions are the root of a lot of the dis-ease that we're facing in society today. And we have this programming of when a feeling or emotion comes up is, let's put it over here, like let's put in this this bottle, let's leave it, and it's just going to sit there. No emotions, no feelings. We're gonna set this aside. The problem is we set it aside, and then after a while, it's not just one bottle; it's a whole. Imagine a whole room of bottles of emotions that we've just set aside until one day the physical manifestation of that emotion, the dis-ease, appears, and we're like, "Where did this come from?" Well, you just set aside all that emotional energy, and then out of nowhere, it's like unavoidable.
Totally. And so, Zach, it sounds like before your trip to Brazil, you're really connecting to your breath and holistic practices. And you went to Brazil, and this spiritual awakening sort of happened. And I would love to hear about how your story continued from there in terms of both the holistic in your body lens and the
Hmm.
spiritual lens.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I went to Brazil at first, I was slightly unconscious. Slightly unconscious. I say this because I had already interacted with plant medicine and didn't see it as plant medicine regards to cannabis. And I had an experience looking back. Cannabis was like something that I would do unintentionally, intentionally. So before I went to Brazil, yeah. So before I went to Brazil, I was living in a cabin in outside Lexington, Virginia, in the mountains. And I remember the winter, I had these profound experiences of being by myself and connecting with cannabis. Though I didn't have an intention. I just was like, let me try this out. Let me experiment. Let's see. And I found a lot of peace being by myself. And I think that was when I really first started to think about this. Like, am I going in the right direction in my life right now? Is there a way that I can change? And it was really cannabis was just like a small was giving me that lens. Though like I was very much in the system and believing everything that was told to me. So fast forward to Brazil, I was still unconscious. I was I just knew like something in my soul was saying just go. And it was when I first arrived was like that first moment of yes. That was me trusting my intuition for the first time in my life. Yeah, from there, so being in Brazil, I was in Rio for 6 months, and I realized everyone here is happy. Everyone is enjoying their life. They're active, they're going to the beach, interacting with each other. They prioritize relationships and family. And I knew that that was something I wanted to keep cultivating in my life. And so that was the really big insight of Brazil. And even as I continued to travel back and forth from the US to Brazil, I knew that community was really important early on in my journey. And I knew that it was important also to play and to be like a child, to be able to tap into my inner child in a healthy manner and to explore movement and creativity, and then also the breath that was there, though it was more of a play. It was more like, okay, this is something that I'm experimenting first, and it wasn't very serious. It was my introduction to this world, though, to this world of holistic healing and health.
Wow. I see so much of that in my own journey. It's so beautiful to hear about how seeing the way the people of Brazil and Rio were living their lives was so different than what you're accustomed to here in America. I think that's just a big part of my journey too. Talking about prioritizing relationships and family, I feel a lot of my ideas are paradoxical and it's kind of can be difficult to explain with a coherent start and end, but when we're stuck in our dis-ease, it's hard to prioritize people outside of us. In my opinion, that's been my experience. Like, it made me selfish because I was so in such a rough place. I was just trying to survive in my own body, and I couldn't really think beyond myself, and I didn't have gifts to share. And we're also taught, it's a lot of focus on work and money and like what sort of life can you build for yourself as a lone wolf, and not how much can we achieve if we do it together. And by the way, yeah, we're humans. We're here to have fun and play and create and just find joy through connection. It's not like, oh my God, you need to work and get A's and like make a lot of money. Like, that's not the
Hmm.
thing. That, financial stability can be very important, but it's not the thing. It's not the thing. It's one of the things. And it's very imbalanced here, and overcoming that is something I just really relate to you. And
Yeah, totally. And I'm curious to go deeper into how things unfolded for you with plant medicine as well, because I think that, I mean, that's really what we've been guiding others through, is how to, because I love how you mentioned with cannabis, how to really intentionally utilize plant medicines to get you back into that soul place of purpose, of what did your soul come here to do and accomplish on this earth. And I feel like your story really reflects that awakening for you. So I would love to hear just kind of how plant medicine came into this and what your experiences were in your studies, um, along working with plant medicines and different types and different shamans and different lineages.
Yeah, I would say it's really easy to unintentionally get into plant medicines through cannabis and it becomes a drug. It becomes a substance that can easily become addictive in that way of unintentionality. That's something I was already aware of. And then actually, a lot of times in my journey, I was very much pushing it away because of my own programming too. Dare, don't do drugs, just say no. And for me, my reaction to that was create a shield, a barrier to all plant medicines. I was very much resistant to even cannabis and things like that growing up. And even ayahuasca, which was actually, I would say, my first intentional journey. And my friends in Brazil, they had already been sitting with ayahuasca, and I had nothing to do with it. I was like, I don't know what that is. I'm not going to do this. And I was completely resistant. I didn't even ask them questions about it at first. And then one of my friends, he wrote an article about his experience, and he talked about his intention, what he got out of it, what he received, and the connection with the universe and with these practices he had already been doing, like meditation and connecting with his father and his mother and his brother. And then I was like, yeah, I want to do that. I want to do that experience. And that was an opening for me. And later on, a couple of weeks later, I was listening to Tim Ferriss, and Aubrey Marcus was on the Tim Ferriss show. And I had no idea who Aubrey Marcus was. I was just like, oh, this guy seems pretty cool. And I was listening to it, and he mentioned ayahuasca. And right away, like, something clicked. It was like, oh, my friend just did ayahuasca. Aubrey Marcus is talking about it. And then the synchronicities started coming. And I realized, oh, the universe is telling me prepare for this ayahuasca journey, this ayahuasca thing. What is this? And so I started to dive deeper into Aubrey Marcus's earliest podcasts, where it's all about ayahuasca. And in that process, I started to prepare myself for my first ceremony. So I technically did what people call the dieta, and did it for around 6 months of preparation before I even went into that ceremony. And having that preparation was so key to the first ceremony, and also so key to my journey with that medicine specifically. And I remember in that first ceremony really being reintroduced to the divine and feeling this connection and oneness and wholeness within myself, and also with everything, like with the universe, with my family, with my friends, with my community, with nature. And it was so beautiful. And remember being by the fire, sitting and pouring out tears just all night, like so many tears. And I could feel it wasn't just my tears, it was my ancestors' tears, and specifically the male lineage. So my father, grandfather, great grandfather, all those suppressed emotions were letting I was letting them out, and it was all those bottles of emotions just coming out. It was all coming out. And it was a really big insight into my future, because looking back, I can understand that as the opening to this, the men's work, the men's healing, and helping other men tap into their emotions and release these blockages that are happening in the subconscious. So, so yeah, that was really my introduction to intentional use of plant medicine, and it was beautiful first ceremony.
Wow. Wow. I'm like kind of leaping out of my seat right now because you just shared so many things. As we continue to talk, I just keep connecting to be like, oh, I feel that. That's my journey, bro. Like, I'm really, oh man. And I really want to emphasize like a few things you said along the way. One, you talked about the difference in sitting with the medicine in an intentional way, saying, I don't need that because that's a mind altering substance that's not good for me. And as people that work specifically with the population of people in recovery from addiction, many of them going through 12-step programs, they're taught psychoactive substances have no place in your life. And as you realize too, that's not true, because it's just about what you use it, how you use it, and what your intention is, and everything around it. You underwent a spiritual journey of coming back to wholeness and oneness in your own words. And in that process, you did dieta, which I want to hear more about, but you really took the pre integration so seriously, preparing your body for this experience. You set intentions, you have ceremony, you have ritual around it. And in that, you experience profound healing. And I don't think anyone could say that's not medicine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for myself, that was really essential. That was the key to that first ceremony. That first journey was the preparation. And yeah, I love what you said, EJ, about that pre-integration. And uh, for myself in that process, the key piece was the meditation. So I really started to get into a consistent meditation practice before the ceremony, and really emphasizing the spiritual practice of, okay, meditation, journaling, uh, eating cleaner, in the sense of not overeating, and living more balanced, having some movement practice but not overdoing it also. And and then right before, the week of the ceremony, having a clear intention, and also asking friends for support in that process. And one of my friends, he told me, surrender. That's the key.
Mm.
Just surrender. And so I went into that ceremony with this intention in my heart, as well as, this is an opportunity for me to surrender and understand what that means.
Mm. Yeah, so beautiful. And I know from working with you within medicine spaces too, we've shared just how you bring that into everything. And I think we've had discussions before too about, the old name of this podcast and the old name of my business was Life is a Ceremony. And I really see you as someone who, through this process and maybe with the help of ayahuasca, to help ingrain this new way of being into the way that you live and breathe and act throughout the day, for you to treat every single moment as a prayer. Like your life is kind of this moving prayer. And I witness you, before drinking your kombucha, you always will charge your kombucha up and charge your food up before sitting with that. And that's such an important part of the process. And it sounds like you were really guided for all of your pre-integration and preparation work for sitting with ayahuasca. You were really guided into this way of living intentionally. And I think it is so important because it's often overlooked. People talk about the visions and all of these big aspects of sitting with medicine. And really, the most beautiful piece is how we get to learn how to treat every moment as sacred, and how to treat every person, every plant, every piece of Mother Earth and piece of this existence as a sacred gift, and integrating that into our daily lives. And you're just a really beautiful living example of someone who does that, which is incredible. I have a question for you. What advice do you have for someone who is new to exploring plant medicines?
Mhm. I would say specifically one thing that comes up for me is the intention around it. What is your intention? What is it that you're looking to get out of the medicine? Also, what is it that you can let go of as well in that? So naturally we have program expectations. So in that, the light of the intention is like, yeah, what do you want? What do you want to cultivate? What do you want to create in yourself? And then the other side of that is, what do you want to let go of? Also, was it in this intention that you actually want to release and not hold so much control and attachment to? And I find that's the power of intention, is holding it for a moment, feeling the power of that intention, and then letting it go. And I see that specifically with plant medicines and the journeys that we take with these plant medicines, that it's so important to learn that non-attachment and learn how to really selectively choose what we want to cultivate, and also how to let go of it and not feel so entangled and trapped by a certain intention, and be more open to the natural flow of life in the universe. It's like, imagine you know you where you want to go. You know exactly what you want to create. However, how you get there is a mystery.
Hmm.
And what would you say is the importance of those pre-integration practices too?
hmm Yeah, respect. All the pre-integration practices, the dieta, is all about creating respect with yourself, respect for the earth, respect for the medicine, respect for the spirit. And it's interesting. I was reading a book called The Fourfold Way recently, and simply looking at respect not as from a power standpoint, but from a point of how to respect. So re meaning again, and then spect actually comes from the word see, to see something again, to look at something with a new lens that you didn't have before. And I think that's really the key to the medicines, is like, how can you see your life and see all your relationships from a new lens, and very key to plant medicine. So key.
Definitely. And I think that, so many people enter into this world learning how to use intention just because they've heard about maybe ayahuasca or the healing benefits of mushrooms, and they don't recognize that there is this reverence that we need to cultivate with the medicines. And that's really how we get the most out of our experiences, is by creating that relationship. And there's so much that people end up learning on this path that can also be applied to outside of ceremony spaces, or I should say outside of plant medicine ceremony spaces, like, fire ceremony is for letting things go. You talked about letting things go, but you don't have to ingest plant medicine to do that. You can do that in a different way. And I think it's important to include all of the integrated ways that we can bring ceremony and reverence for Mother Earth and for the plant spirits into our daily lives.
I want to touch on the idea of intention as well, and engaging in right relation with the plants, because there is so much healing potential regardless, like as you mentioned when you were younger, like conscious use like kind of opened you up to introspection and reflection and self-discovery. And I just want to emphasize for people like how critical intention is, and also in setting the intention you can realize if you're being honest to yourself or not. So for me, let's say I'm having a super challenging day emotionally and I'm tired and depleted, and that's a challenging place for me to sit and just be and accept.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, do I want to engage with cannabis to help me heal? It's like, what's my intention? And I can literally look at it and like imagine like nothing comes through because it's not true. I don't have an intention and such. I choose not to sit with cannabis at that time. Or an even simpler one that people may not think about as much as food. What is my intention for eating this food right now? Am I hungry? Or am I just tired or worn down a bit emotionally? And so intention is a really good marker for just making sure you are in right relation with whatever you're interacting with.
Mm-hmm. And in that, the body is super intelligent as well. Body holds so much wisdom, and the body is an expression of the wisdom of the soul as well. So those two are working together. So in that relationship, what you're saying also, I see everything as a relationship. So that relationship with food is symbolic, and it's symbolic to our relationship with everything like that we consume, whether that's like, it could even be as simple as how do we consume social media or news. What are the thoughts that come up when we're going throughout our day, and we're consuming something. And I find food as a really great place to start for a lot of people as well. Like when you're talking about preparation, beyond what you're eating, because what you eat is important. I would say beyond that is how how are you creating a relationship with your food and with yourself through eating. And it's very much connected with plant medicine, because how you connect with the plant is usually connected to like our own habits with food or consuming things. So whatever that relationship is will also come out a lot of times in journeys and in ceremony.
Beautifully said. And so earlier you brought up the importance of men's work and how men in particular often struggle with stuck emotions. And I know that's been a story for me. I know bottling up inside and not having a place, a safe space to express those emotions is a struggle for many of the men I've been in men's group with. And I would just love to hear more about your journey in that space and with that group.
Mm-hmm. So I had this insight early on, and when I came back to integrate a lot of the insights from South America, living in Brazil, Peru, Colombia, those places, it naturally came to me that it was important to create spaces for men to heal specifically. And I know that it's important for both men and women to heal. However, a lot of times in the circles and ceremonies, I found that men, and even for myself, it was hard for ourselves to really express fully what was happening. And sometimes there's shame around like taking up too much space, shame about, oh, this is happening emotionally. Like, how are people going to see me in the space? How are other women going to see me? How's my partner going to see me? And what I realized is that it's very important for men to heal with each other so that we can share our emotions and also find a really good balance within our own energy, balancing the masculine and the feminine, where we learn how to do that together so that what I see is we charge each other up, and then we go back to our relationships, we go back to our family, to our partner, and we're more balanced, and we're able to also have an outlet to express our emotions with other men instead of putting it all on the women in our world. And so I saw that instantly, that this was essential. And I was like, okay, I'm going to keep on doing this.
And you're so right about putting it on the woman. Like for many of us, again, for so many men, the only people we open up to like that are potentially our mothers and our partners. And
Mhm.
that's it. And to be frank, there's just a depth of masculine force behind the emotions sometimes that are just not fair to put on the feminine to hold for us. And the way we want to discharge it sometimes needs a lot more power and presence than we can get. And it's just not fair to put it all in that group either. It's just not fair.
Mhm. Yeah, it's like taking all the weight and just be like, here you go. Like, you know.
I think it's so important to have those like feminine healing spaces and the masculine wound healing spaces. It's so important to have those. And we recently had an event where we had like a men's circle, a women's circle, and then we all came together afterwards for healing. But it was so
Mhm.
important to have that sacred separation beforehand to get the nurturing that we needed, because I feel like for women too, like there is so much that I've gained just from being around other women and healing with the same intention, and other people who have had the same struggles and experiences as me is so important. So yeah, good work, you both.
Thank you, Kelia. And Zach, what do you think is something for men to look at in their journey of self healing and emotional exploration? Like, what tools have served you?
it More recently, there's two things that I can really pinpoint now. I can really say like this is where the work is. One has been stories, mindset, right? Mindset being the story we tell ourselves, the story we tell ourselves about ourselves, to ourselves, about what we can do and what we can't do, who we are and who we aren't. So key to tap into the stories because that's creating our perspective and perception of the world that we're living in. And really, it's those past stories are so key for men to tap into because it's creating our present day expectations around everything. So that's one thing. And then also connected to that, beyond the story is always an emotion or feeling. And really tapping into those emotions and feelings and feeling safe to express them, feeling
Mm.
safe to let it out, and not feel like you have to change anything. Just like, okay, this is what I'm feeling. Let me let it out. Let me share what's happening here. What story is it attached to? And then the other piece I would say is archetypes, because usually those stories are connected with specific archetypes and specific images that are programmed into us from a young age. For example, imagine we all, as boys, at some point have this archetype implanted of the hero or the king or prince, the villain, the victim. We know these from, uh, you know, from different movies or TV shows, and that becomes imprinted in us as we grow up. And so understanding these archetypes are so important because to every archetype, every character, there's both the shadow and the light. And really understanding both aspects can really help us understand ourselves and the story that we're telling ourselves.
So two things come through for me is one, everything you said I believe to be true, like the stories and the mindset we have about ourselves and our own personal dialogue and our narrative about what's happening in the world around us is so key. And I think people in recovery get a really good chance to explore these, in particular through the deep journaling and shadow work as part of the 12 steps, like identifying how every story, judgment, and resentment I have, and every time I was triggered, comes back to me. And it doesn't have anything to do with people outside of me, it comes back to me. And in transmuting that, we also need to navigate the emotions that we're protecting ourselves from, which is the next thing you touched on. And I just want to relate to that, in that I have been going through a challenging time for me emotionally these past few days. And that's a big part of that has been our preparation to go to the jungle and sit with ayahuasca in a couple of weeks now. And I've said, damn, I just need men's group right now. Like, I need that safe space to be in my weakest and just be in my saddest, but for a group of people that are my peers and my brothers, like no one I have to show up for in any other way. And I was ultimately able to transmute that a lot through dance and movement and play. But at the same time, just emphasizing, yeah, having safe spaces for that is so important. And I would love just to give space for you to talk more about the archetypes. I've personally loved reading Carl Jung's work, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, and identifying the shadows in me and the imbalances in me that led to my disease and addictions. And I'll share specifically, very briefly, that I strongly identified as with the addicted lover archetype, which stemmed from the world is around me and it shouldn't be challenging, and I need to just enjoy every pleasure, and the pleasures need to be building and I never need to come down. And that looks like a really imbalanced relationship to challenge and being unable to sit in challenging emotions. And it looks like selfishness, and that everything is about me and my pain or my pleasure, or solving my pains and enhancing my pleasures, and an imbalanced relationship with consumption of food and drugs and media. And just reading that book and seeing that all the archetypes within me really brought to light for me what such beautiful awareness to me, what I can focus on in my healing. So I would love to hear you touch upon those a bit more.
Yeah, something that I see, like where you're saying the addicted lover connected with that is this part of our society and the unconsciousness of it's this hedonism, the attachment to comfort also is what I can see. And for me, what comes up a lot, specifically in the men's circles, is the archetype of the warrior. And you touched upon this, the lone wolf, which I would just separate that as the wolf archetype and how it's symbolic in our culture and society right now. It's very relevant. So, warrior specifically, starting with that, the warrior, the shadow of the warrior is like the leader that sacrifices himself all the time. That's like I have to serve others. Like I have to be a provide for men. I have to be the provider. I have to go work more. I'm not enough. Like I need more money. Like I need like all the survivor type things that happen of like the programming of that warrior is very clear in men in the shadow. The light of it is be a a strong, centered, heart-centered leader, to be a protector, to be a guide, a space for love, a space for healing, holding that space with lots of peace and presence, and really living this moment and living life with values and some things to stand for. So I would say on the warrior side of things, like that's really important to see those two clearly. And then the other thing is the wolf. So wolf archetype for me, that spirit animal has to do directly with community. And in order to cultivate community, I also realize that it's important to cultivate self. So the reason that's very important is because as we cultivate ourself, as we cultivate our values and love ourselves, it's easier to show up for the other person. And there's less expectation around the we, the collective, because you already have a lot of your basic principles, basic values. You know who you are. So it's easier to show up as yourself in a group. And that's been really key, is finding that balance between knowing yourself and then knowing yourself within the men's group or within any group, within your family, within your community. And a lot of times the wolf archetype shows up as a teacher. So once you've known yourself, it's easier for you to show up as a leader and teacher for your family and community and your partnership, anything in work, because you clearly have this understanding of this is what I stand for, this is who I am. And now it's easy for me to share that with others.
And I know, again, bringing it back to healing ourselves and the dis-ease within us, I think it's hard to know who you are, both as an individual and in a group setting, without having done that work, because you're just being controlled by those stories and those traumas and acting them out, and you're not embodying your highest self.
Mhm.
And if anyone needs any more motivation to heal, man, it's just so much more rewarding to know who you are, at least at that point in your life, and to just be fully authentic in that.
And it's applicable to everyone too. Like, even though you're talking about the masculine archetypes, it's still, for everyone, we can lose ourselves within a society, and we are witnessing a culture that has very skewed values, and everyone kind of losing themselves, losing their individuality to this, the cultural norms and what is seen as acceptable in our society today. And I feel like so much of the plant medicine journey and all of the healing work that we do is bringing us back to who we are as our most authentic selves. And so doing that work, the archetypal work of looking at where your wounded wolf is not allowing you to be that, to find who you really are, and to have the bravery and the courage it takes to show up authentically, even when you are different from those around you. And so, yeah, it's just so important for us to be doing this work. And it's so much of what I feel like the medicines, all of the medicines, lifestyle medicine, plant medicine, all of the healing teaches us how to do that, how to come back into wholeness with ourselves so that we can know how to come into community again and can be in these healing circles where we can really heal the world. Because I think that it's going to take a lot of collaboration for us to be able to heal the earth the way that the earth is needing to be healed. And so all of this healing work that we are doing for ourselves is also for the collective, and also so that we can move forward. Yeah. So you are going to be doing a masterclass for the people in our Plant Allied Recovery program on some lifestyle medicine techniques that you teach your clients. And I was wondering if you could start by just introducing us a little bit to what the 4 keys to live in ease are, just briefly going over some of those concepts.
So I'm going to start by going over the 4 and introducing them all at once, and then go into each one more in depth. So there's 4 keys to live in ease, also live in flow and abundance, and really become a more conscious creator of your reality, and also be your own healer. So the first one is embodiment. Second one is empowerment. Third one is expression. And the fourth one is experimentation, all starting with with E. And so going back, embodiment is really important because it's really essential to get into your body, and a simple way to do that is through the breath and through practices that connect you with your heart. Second one, empowerment, is all about connecting with your stories and the story that you're telling yourself, your own mindset, and creating an empowered mindset is really key to changing everything, changing your life and your reality. And then the third, expression, is all about what's the story that you tell to yourself and to others. So, how do you express yourself in the world? How do you take action on these things that are happening internally? And then experimentations, all connected with how are you playing? How are you seeing the world as an inner alchemist? How are you tapping in with the power of your inner child, the light of it, and exploring different ways to interact with the world, to create? So those are the 4 keys to live in ease, and we'll dive into those deeper.
So real quick, is this something that you found people to be enormously successful with?
It within integration, and specifically plant medicine integration, this is essential. This is like, if you have these 4 keys before a ceremony and after, you're almost guaranteed 100% to change your life, because it's a simple framework to actually take what you learn and then create something from it. And that's the integration aspect, is take action on what you receive in the ceremony.
Beautiful. So yeah, so for the people within our Plant Allied Recovery program, we are going to be having Zach do a masterclass on some of these lifestyle medicine techniques. And we're so excited for that. And so grateful to have you on, Zach. Really just like, it warms my heart. I've witnessed you in your journey, and you've witnessed me in mine, and a lot has shifted and changed since we've both met each other. And it's really beautiful to be just seeing all that you're doing to heal the world. And I'm really grateful to have gotten to drop in with you. It's always a pleasure.
I'm also so grateful to have you on, Zach, and I really look forward to dropping in further. And man, I just know I could riff for you for hours, because everything you said was really landing with me. And I'm so grateful for what you shared and how it just may serve the people that are listening. So thank you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Kelia, and thank you, EJ. It was great to connect here, to share my story, to share some of the principles I live by. Of course, there's a lot more, and it's just really amazing to have this opportunity to share and to connect and cultivate these relationships here. So thank you all.
Yeah, and really quickly, how can our listeners connect with you further? Do you have a website and social media that you want to share?
Simplest way is through Instagram at is my name, so Zach with an H, and then Barney, Barney, like the dinosaur, and then .lm.
Cool. So Zach
Yeah.
at ZachBarney.lm on Instagram.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Zach.
Thank you.